Review code provided by the developer. For more information on the game, visit the link in the description down below. Special thanks to NIS America for sending a copy of the game. Shin Megami Tensei is one of the longest-standing JRPG franchises ever, up there with the likes of Final Fantasy and Dragon Quest. With its uniquely dark undertones, high difficulty ceiling, and interesting creature designs, Shin Megami Tensei truly stands out as a JRPG series. But Mike, I hear you saying, isn't this video about Monark? Why, yes, it is. However, I thought mentioning Shin Megami Tensei was worthwhile because some of the developers for Monark were ex-developers of the Shin Megami Tensei series. When I first heard that fact about this game, I knew I had to give this game a try for myself. Part of me was curious as to how influential Shin Megami Tensei would be for the entire game, from the storytelling to the combat. I found myself wondering if this would just be a clone of Shin Megami Tensei, or if it will be able to stand on its own 2 feet as another quality JRPG. Thanks to NIS America, I was able to play Monark before release with a review code, so let me give you my early thoughts on the game. Keep in mind that these thoughts are from about 10 hours of the game, so if you're still unsure as to whether or not you want to pick this game up, I recommend trying the demo and playing it for yourself. As of the writing of this video, the demo is still available to download on the PlayStation Store as well as the Nintendo eShop. Keep in mind, there will be minor story spoilers, so click off this video if you don't want to hear details about the game. With all that out of the way, let's roll the intro. The story of Monark revolves around a few distortions affecting Shin Mikado Academy, the main character's high school. The first of these is a barrier surrounding the entire academy, making it so the students can't escape. Inside the school, there's a phenomenon that occurs called the Mist, which makes people go insane the longer they stay in there. Is anyone else getting Persona 4 flashbacks? Within the Mist, you come across a stack of cell phones radiating a cell signal. Picking up a phone call teleports you to the other world, where demons are controlled by pact bearers and are guarding crystals called ideals. By shattering all these crystals possessed by the pact bearer's sense of self is therefore destroyed. However, it is not that simple, because the last crystal is always guarded by the Monark, roll credits, who represents the deadly sin of the ideal. Monarchs are very tough, so you'd best be prepared before going in to fight one yourself. At first, it was quite difficult to grasp the general gist of the story, but over a few hours I was slowly able to put everything together. Now, of course, this is just the first few hours of the game, so the story could become more complex throughout the game. But rest assured, the story can be relatively simple to put together in the beginning. Right off the bat, I noticed the gameplay in Monark felt familiar. I'm by no means saying that this is a Persona clone, but the Warped Academy setting certainly feels like it was inspired by Shin Megami Tensei, as that series often has a setting that involves a school being under the curse of a strange phenomenon of some kind. Your overworld gameplay is fairly simple, as you walk around the academy and interact with NPCs, typical JRPG stuff. Around the academy, however, you can find these crystals lying around where you can get stat bonuses if your deadly sin stats are high enough. The combat gameplay in Monark is like if you took the tactics-based unit movement aspect from Mario and Rabbids, but also added special skills like in Persona. In battles, you move in a limited area each turn, and you have a variety of options of what to do. You can use arts, which are attacks that deplete HP every single time you use them, so similar to Persona's physical moves. Then you have something called authorities, which are more elemental-based attacks that can inflict status effects. The caveat to that, though, is that your mad gauge will go up whenever you use an authority, so use those wisely. If your mad gauge reaches 100%, it's game over. Perhaps you're in a situation where the main character is low on HP, but your healer unit already moved. Well, you can use the defer mechanic to skip a unit's turn, so one of your other units can move a second time. Say if you have your healer attack an enemy, but your main character is low on health. You can make your main character use Defer to give up their turn, but also give your healer a second turn to restore health. Be warned, as this also increases the mad gauge. Everything is essentially built around madness. I mentioned units, but who's actually battling with you? Well, every Pact Bearer you defeat gives you an additional party member based on the deadly sin of said Pact Bearer. From what I've played so far, I've determined Lust is more of a ranged attacker, and Pride is a healer that wields a spear. Now, as far as the combat goes, it took a couple of minutes to understand how the skills worked, but I found it pretty simple to pick up. If the spectacle of all the combat options is overwhelming and you find yourself dying a lot, don't panic. There is a casual mode in the game that you can switch to at any time. Switching to this mode results in minus 30% damage taken and minus 50% mad gauge being filled up while you traverse the mist. Remember, there is no shame in turning on casual mode. Games are supposed to be enjoyed, so play to your heart's content. For this video, I played on normal difficulty, and I've gotta say, it was a little daunting for me. While recording the footage for this video, I actually died 3 times in the first battle. You have to fight a few level 3 demons for your first ever fight, so it can be a little tough for first timers. Or I'm just really bad. This isn't necessarily a criticism on the game, I just wanted to make a point that you're not alone if you're struggling in the early game. The way you level up is fairly unconventional compared to other JRPGs I've played. After fighting battles, you gain a currency called Spirit. Spirit is used to unlock new skills via a skill tree, and every time you unlock or upgrade a skill that you have, your level goes up by 1. I found myself grinding a bit in the early game just to get enough spirit to buy cheap skills so I can level up for the upcoming bosses, which I generally don't like to do. If a game requires you to grind for upcoming battles instead of naturally progressing you towards them, I can find that to be a bit frustrating. When I first booted up the game, let me tell you this game jumped out to me right away. The cell shading on the characters looks excellent, and the art style on the character portraits looks really good. However, I have some notes about the game's performance. For context, my review copy was on the PlayStation 4, which is a decent system in terms of hardware. Meanwhile, while walking through the academy, I have seen some significant frame drops when walking around. I don't usually hyper-focus on frame rates, but when the frame rate drops to like 20 when I'm literally walking around an academy, it's a bit hard to ignore. What I will say is this only seems to be on the first and second floors of the academy. The rest of the game seems to run fine so far, it's just those specific floors. I do have a theory as to why that's the case. When you're on the second floor, there is a balcony that looks over the common area of the first floor. My theory is that since the first floor is in view, the game is trying to render both floors at the same time, which uses more system resources. I am by no means a game developer, so there's a good chance that all of that is completely unrelated, but I do think it's worth looking into. If you're a developer watching this, consider giving that area a second look in terms of performance. Speaking of the Academy, I gotta say, it isn't that great of a hub world in terms of design. It's mostly just narrow hallways with NPCs standing around, and there's very little to do other than occasionally taking a psychological quiz from some random person. Every floor feels a lot of the same thing, and I hate to say it, it's a little boring to just walk around in. Even with the eerie atmosphere of the mist, it's just a hallway with a few open doors to rooms. While we're on the subject of world design, I want to talk about where battles take place. It's a limited plane populated by a few enemies and maybe a couple of walls. It doesn't feel like I'm battling in some kind of intense demon world, it just feels like I'm moving units on a limited space and pressing A. Don't get me wrong, the combat is fun to strategize with, but the complexity of the combat doesn't matter a lot when the battlefield is just a generic plane. Moving into other design aspects, let's talk characters. The main character is about what you'd expect from a JRPG. A young, messy-haired silent protagonist who is a second-year student at his school. I will say though, his white hair combined with his red eyes looks really cool. One of your friends is Nozomi Hinata, who was previously the student council president. She was removed from her position because she was unable to properly handle the mysterious mist going around the school, so she was replaced by Kurama Hitotsubashi. Apologies if I pronounced that poorly. Hitotsubashi is an arrogant and brash person who treats his position as student council president almost like a dictatorship. He is quite self-absorbed, giving him credit for saving the students from the mist when, realistically, he's doing nothing. One could say he's quite prideful of himself. By far, my favorite character design in this game has to be Vanitas. No, not that one. Vanitas is Well, he's something. Taking on the form of a stuffed rabbit, Vanitas is a being that gives the main character the authority of vanity. What I think is the best part about Vanitas is his writing. He always speaks in rhymes, so it was always fun to see how creatively the writers string his lines together so his tutorials almost sound like poems. With how unique and interesting Vanitas is, it makes me curious and excited to see what role he plays later in the game, as I feel like he'll be more prevalent as the story goes on. Previously, I talked about party members that are named after the 7 deadly sins. A cool part about these units is that you can customize them with different armor pieces, facial features, and voice lines. I like this feature as it lets you personalize your party members a little bit, but at the same time, I can't help but wonder why this amount of customization isn't available for the main character. You're allowed to name him, so I see no reason why you can't customize him. But hey, I'll let design choices be design choices. Beyond units, let's briefly talk about enemy designs. This is an aspect where I think the game falls very short. The Monarchs themselves are really cool, but the demons that fight alongside them are so painfully generic. Every enemy in the game that isn't a Monarch is just a skeleton with a sword, spear, or crossbow. I get that they're supposed to be the grunts of the Pact Bearer, but you couldn't just go for a little bit more variety? Monarch is a decently constructed JRPG that uniquely blends tactics gameplay with JRPG-style combat skills. While its themes appear to be heavily inspired by Shin Megami Tensei, especially since ex-developers of the series worked on this project, it is still engaging to play through. Yeah, the frame rate may not be the best in specific moments, and sure, the world and enemy designs leave something to be desired for sure, but the story seems to pick up some of the slack that the gameplay puts down. After playing about 10 hours of Monarch, I think it's worth looking into if you're a fan of Shin Megami Tensei, or even just looking for another JRPG that breaks the mold a little bit. Like I said before, as of the writing of this video, the demo is still available on the PlayStation Store as well as the Nintendo eShop, so I would give it a download and try the game for yourself before you buy it. Monarch releases on PlayStation 5, PlayStation 4, Nintendo Switch, and PC on February 22nd, 2022 in North America, and the following dates in the other regions on screen right now. If you want to learn more about the game and pre-order it, use the link in the description down below. Once again, thank you so much to NIS America for providing a review code. That's going to be it from me, and with that, I will see you all in the next video.